All righty, let's see if we can get this show on the road. We'll give everyone just a sec to get tuned in. It always takes a moment to get everyone out of the waiting room and here into the session with us. Anyway, I hope you're having a fabulous day. Welcome. Excited to have you as we talk about the NPTE essentials and what you need to know in order to absolutely dominate on test day. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me as we talk about all the steps you need to take as a part of your NPTE journey. As you get tuned in, if you wouldn't mind, head over to the chat box and give me a quick sound and video check. Plus, always interesting to see where everyone's tuning in from. Usually we get folks tuning in from all across the country, sometimes even across the world. So if you don't mind, while we're getting started here, head over to that chat box, make sure it's going out to everyone so everyone can see your great comments. It's a great way to interact with me if you have questions along the way, because I do want to make sure we spend a lot of our time on the questions that you have, and to just generally make sure that the things I'm saying are resonating with you. I want to make sure that we're doing good things for you. So excellent. We've got lots of folks tuning in from sea to shining sea. We got folks from Jordan, California, Michigan, Minnesota, Chicago, Kentucky, North Carolina, Arizona, Oklahoma, Houston, Texas. Let's see, Pittsburgh, Ontario, Canada. Excellent. Very excited to have you all here. Again, very much appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me. So those of you who are a part of the VIP course, I know many of you already are. I know there are some of you who are not yet, and would like to invite you to participate in that. But I will be posting the recording for this session into our VIP course material. You'll be able to see the recording there easily. Those of you who are not signed up for the VIP course, I'll make this video available to you on our social media pages. And so be sure to check that out. I'll have that available for you afterward. So let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Will. A lot of you know me. A lot of you have been in the class before, but my name is Will. I'm a PT. I'm an orthopedic certified specialist. I graduated in 2011, and I continue to be a practicing PT in the great state of Idaho. I know we have had several. I don't know if we have anyone here from Idaho today, but I know we've had several Idahoans, but always a pleasure to have all of you here. I currently practice as a PT. I've got 4 kids, a beautiful wife, and I started PT final exam in 2012, right after I graduated PT school, and started in my first job. I found that as a critical access PT, it meant that I had a lot of opportunity to practice in a very wide variety of settings, anywhere from home health to sideline sports to orthopedics, you name it. Some of my best friends are in the nursing home, meaning that I spent a lot of time doing skilled nursing, the inpatient, the outpatient, a lot of sports and orthopedics. Anyway, so it's something that suited me very well to be able to then go and teach that as well. And so that's been fun. Running PT final exam, it's just been a joy. And as far as my hobbies go, I like to spend time outside. This is actually a picture from my front yard. So I've got a lot of acreage around our house. So we'll go up in the mountains. We can generally go do some snowmobiling in the wintertime, do some hiking in the fall and summertime. Like to climb the top of mountains. That's a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about me. Let's see. Oftentimes I'll post a little poll to see a little bit about you all as well. See what number of attempt you're on, what date you're targeting for your exam. I won't take the time for that right now, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of the resources that I have available to you, not only as a part of the VIP course, but also in general. So if you haven't yet, please check out the NPTE podcast. This is one that I run personally. It's a lot of fun. We go through practice questions, try to give you just little bite-sized bits of information that you can use either during your drive to work, on your clinical, while you're at the gym, whatever it is. I want to make sure that you've got access to as much content as possible. And so if you haven't already, I guess by show of hands, how many of you have already subscribed to the NPT podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to podcasts? How many of you have subscribed to that? Excellent. So we got a bunch of you who have already. Those of you who have subscribed, have you left a review yet? So if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment next time you're on your device and just make sure that you're leaving a 5-star review for us. Really helps us to get the word out, get more subscribers, and to pass the word along about the NPT podcast. Again, a great free resource. Try to do as good a job as possible going through content, put it in a way that you can easily remember it. I I mean, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, a lot of times people say, yeah, well, I could hear your voice on test day telling me about the thing that I should have remembered. And so anyway, if you wouldn't mind, just take a few moments and leave us a 5-star review. It really, really helps. There was a question about the slide deck for today. So those of you who are a part of the VIP class, you can find the slide deck up at the top of the live webinars page. There's a link that says find all session notes here, find session notes here. Those of you who are not, I just posted in the chat box a Dropbox link. You can grab the PDF of the slide deck if you'd like, and I'll try to include that. Those of you who are watching this after the fact, I'll try to include that slide deck as well, so you can see that all. All right, so that's a little bit about that. Again, I know I've got a lot of you who are currently members of the VIP class, but those of you who are not yet members of our VIP class, I just wanted to invite you to participate with us. So the VIPT class, this is maybe a little play on words, the VIPTs. So the VIP class, this is one that I run personally. We go through in a very organized, systematic, and what I feel like an extremely effective way to go through the content to get you ready for test day. Now, granted, it's not an easy journey. We go through lots and lots and lots of content. I give you a workbook to go through. We go through lots of content together, and it's certainly a great deal of work. And I don't want to make it sound like it's just a magical fix for all of your problems, although maybe it is. But the point of the VIP class, though, is to give you that mentored feel in small group settings. And that's something you won't find in a lot of other courses, that small group setting. Small group setting, I try to answer every single question that comes along. You have the opportunity to schedule one-on-one power calls with me at no extra charge. So you can schedule a call or two with me to make sure you're on the right track. We can talk about content. We can talk through practice questions. You do have a whole video library that I provide to you of content related to all the body systems. And all this comes for 9-month access. Again, I know the price tag, put it up close to $1,000. I mean, let's be honest, that's a lot on a student budget. But for the content and the time and the quantity you get, I'll stand by that. You won't find this quality and quantity of content in any of the other courses out there. So if you're interested in something that's organized, proven, and extremely effective at getting you ready for the NPTE, I'd highly encourage you to participate in our VIP class, which this week is our kickoff week. We're talking about the introductory material to get you ready for the actual exam. So what's our goal today? Our goal today is to talk about the content of the exam, its development, its structure, and how you can, in a way, hack the exam to make sure that you've got the right plan in place. Now, if we have time, we'll go through a practice question or two. However, I do want to spend some time. I got some score reports from some individuals who want me to go through their score reports from the January exam. So we'll talk about that. I think you'll find that very interesting to see what number of questions is required to pass the exam, what the representation is on all the different sections. I think you'll enjoy that. So, all right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with all that. So in 2023, there weren't any significant major changes. The biggest changes are coming in 2024. So I don't think, I guess, tell me if I'm wrong, but probably most of you here are targeting the exam this year. There may be someone who's tuned in, who's planning on the exam for the following year, for 2024. But in the meantime, we'll talk very specifically about 2023. So in 2023, this is the last year for this content outline before they redo a few of the sections. It's not going to be a major change, but for 2023, you need to make sure that you've got a very firm grasp on lymphatic system. They pulled that away from cardiovascular and pulmonary. Gastrointestinal examination, they added a couple of questions there. They did reduce MSK by about 10% from the previous outline, which was in 2018, and then just some minor reallocations. But the biggest thing that you'll see and note this year are the video questions. So the video questions, and you've heard me say this before, but video questions, you'll find them underwhelming. They're typically very brief, often, well, not just often, but they're not produced, not of a studio quality content. Rather, it's meant to be very simple and clear to show you either an exercise or an exam technique, and you just need to analyze what it's doing and what the purpose of it is. And I'll talk about that more on Thursday when we talk about our practice questions and the strategies specifically around multiple choice questions. But with video questions and image questions, typically these are the ones you read backwards, meaning you look at the answer options before analyzing the video. That way you can really narrow your focus to, okay, these are my 4 options. I need to look for this in the video, whether that's present or not. So those are the things you'll see in the video questions. Just a little preview for 2024. There will be story questions, meaning that they'll give you a patient case and you'll answer like 3 questions based on that patient case. And so that will not occur in 2023. However, it is possible they could roll out some, no, they won't. They need to do some, they'll put it on the PETE exams. They'll put those story type questions in. Once we get to October, they'll put those story questions on, but that'll be how they validate those questions before they're rolled out to you in live format where you're actually getting your license. All right, so here is the content outline. Most of you are already familiar with this, quite familiar with this, but the content outline, this is the number of questions represented on your exam. I mean, this is the content outline. It was updated in 2018. They really don't make any major changes for about every 5 years. COVID set it all back 1 year, and so 2024 is the next iteration of the content outline. But you can see that the big 3 systems are the largest proportion on the exam, somewhere between 23 and 28 questions on cardiopulm, musculoskeletal nearly 60, and neuromuscular nearly 50. You'll see that these are the big 3, often referred to as the big 3. So those of you who've been a part of our crash courses, we focus heavily on just the big 3. In our VIP class, we will go over the big 3 twice. We'll actually go through it starting next week. We'll go through the musculoskeletal section. Then we will return to the musculoskeletal section in time for the crash course the first week of April. The reason I do that is because this represents almost 75% of the exam. It's such a big part of the exam that really needs to be where you spend most of your time and focus, making sure that you have a very clear understanding of the big 3 systems. Then going down through the other systems, clearly you see integumentary, metabolic, endocrine, gastrointestinal, genitourinary, lymphatic. All these are represented with a handful of questions, somewhere between 3 to 7 or up to 12 for integ. And then system interactions, 8 to 12. The non-systems, this is the one I get questions all the time about. Will, how do I study the non-systems? Well, there's just a handful in each one. And that's the frustrating part, is that there's no unified resource for the non-systems. So like the therapeutic modalities book is different than your research and evidence-based practice book. So you can see how there's not a unified or singular resource. Now, as a part of the VIP class, I do try to compile all of the non-systems material into a series of short videos to try to show you what the parameters are for your therapeutic modalities, talk about research and evidence-based practice, really try to break it down for you so you can see each of the subsections and have an adequate knowledge of them to answer them all appropriately, just because, again, it's a smaller section on the exam, but cumulatively, it's a largish section on the exam. So what is it, about 30 questions related to the non-systems. So just of note, this isn't as much of a deal now as it was certainly 2 years ago. But as we get farther and farther away from COVID-19, we find that there are fewer headaches, but there are some things that tend to persist, whether that includes social distancing, masking. That does depend on the region where you'll be testing, whether masks are required. And so it just double check with your local Prometric center just to make sure that you are practicing the way that you'll be tested. For instance, masking, I found that for many people, especially if you wear glasses, that masking, and you probably found this as well, that testing while masked with glasses on is a royal pain. So you just have to plan on things like that. Again, check with your local test center. Again, not nearly as much of a big of a deal as it was a couple of years ago, but certainly it could provide for some extra headaches on test day. And then one of the benefits that you get from this is that every test date now is an extended test date. There are 2 days for every test date. And so it gives you get automatically assigned to one. So it's not like you have a big choice of which one to choose. However, it does give you a little bit more of a window to maybe get the time that works best for you, whether that's 8 a.m. or 1 p.m. or whatever. So that's COVID-19. We're going to talk about a content outline, but if you wonder how they develop this content outline, like the number of questions, they take a practice analysis every few years. And the practice analysis just looks at, okay, where are PTs practicing? And therefore, wherever they're practicing, we need to make sure that they are prepared for that. So that's why the content outline is representative of what an entry-level PT would encounter in their first year. And so just keep that in mind of what's actually on the NPT. It's what you will encounter as a first-year PT. So entry-level PT, you're out in the field. It is likely that you could encounter entry-level material in each of these sections. Now, you're not required to be an expert at every single section. However, you do need to have clarity, at least enough to problem solve or to find the answer when it comes to this content. And again, you'll see that that's very heavily represented in the big three systems, because that is clearly where we spend almost all of our time, especially as entry-level PTs, spend all of our time there. So entry-level content, we mentioned that. Current content, this is one that I always get questions about this, like, will there be questions about dry needling on there? Or will there be questions about some new manipulation technique? And the answer is no. They typically, well, not typically, they categorically put content that is published in textbooks only. So they're not talking about your research articles. This is just current published textbooks within the last 5 years. They're looking at just your, we'll call it your boring PT content, not very sexy. It's just the content that continues to live on and on. I mean, certainly there will be some minor updates year to year, but published textbooks, think of that caliber of content, and that'll help guide your studies as well. So you're not spending a lot of time in like the Journal of Orthopedic Sports and Sports Physical Therapy or JOSPT or any of the cutting edge material. You'll find that that's not tested on the exam. So when it comes to exam development, the test is actually written by your peer PTs. So it's written by a set of volunteer item writers across the country. They're old and young, practicing in inpatients to outpatients and everything in between. They get this very diverse set of item writers to create the first draft of a question. And then each question then goes through a series of committees. It takes about 2 years for a question that's written to actually appear on your exam. So lest you think, and again, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm going to bat for the FSBPT, but the Federation of State Boards of PT, they put a lot of time and effort into getting these questions ready. It takes about 2 years and 8 different committees for them to be edited and vetted until finally they show up on your exam. But this time, not as an actual scored item, but as a pretest item. So a pretest item, you'll get 50 of these on your actual exam. And what it is that they're analyzing to see if they're valid questions before they roll them out as an actual scored item. Then they use what's called item response theory to determine whether or not it is a valid question. So for those of you testing for the PT exam, the NPT, there are 200 questions grouped into blocks. So this is not an adaptive exam, meaning that it doesn't like change as you get questions wrong. They don't get easier. If you get them right, they get harder. Nothing like that. They get a straight set of questions, boom, plus 50 unscored items. Now, the bad news is that those 50 unscored items are randomly distributed throughout the entirety of the exam. You can't identify them as like, oh, this is a scored item, this is not a scored item. Now, that's why they do it. They're testing to see if in test conditions, what the results will be. And so on test day, there's 250 items. There are 5 to 10 different forms of the exam on any given test day. So there's a multitude of test forms. All this means is that you can't cheat on, if you're sitting next to your best buddy and you're taking the exam, or you've heard me say this before, probably. Like you come out of the exam and say, dang, there were a lot of questions about cerebral palsy. And your friend will look at you like, I didn't see a single one on cerebral palsy. And they'll get that panicked look in their eyes. Well, it's because you took a different form of the exam. So again, trying to avoid cheating. Each form is then scaled. Because they're different forms, they use a scale scoring. And I'll talk about scale scoring here in just a minute, just to equilibrate all the attempts. And then each test item, each test question is only used a time or two before it's finally retired. And again, that's to prevent cheating. So you can't go in and harvest questions and then spit them out on the internet. It doesn't work. So 250 items on PT and 200 for PTA. And of note, in 2024, these numbers will change slightly. They'll actually come down a spec, but it's because they're giving you longer problems to evaluate the story type problems. But 250 items PT, 200 items PTA. They are grouped into sections of 50 questions each, 5 sections for the 250 items on the PT exam, 4 sections for PTA. So speaking of the PT exam, you get 5 hours. You get this 5-hour time bank to use as you wish. So the 5 hours, are to be used across the entirety of the test. Now, ideally, in the 5 sections, you can do a little quick math here. You'd say, well, target 1 hour per section. That doesn't mean you have to spend just 1 hour or spend the entire hour. You get 5 hours to work with and you get to use it as you wish. However, you do get what's called a scheduled break after section 2. So scheduled break after section 2, that means the clock stops for 15 minutes. And this is the bathroom break. This is so you can get up, go to the bathroom, get a snack, get medications, get water, come back in and sit down in your seat. You are permitted to take what's called an unscheduled break between any other section. However, the clock does not stop between any of these other sections. So this means that the time continues to roll while you're out of your seat. So consider the unscheduled breaks the emergency bathroom breaks. So if there's real trouble, you can take a quick break, but remember your time is deducted or the time is continuing to roll. Now, you don't have to take any of the breaks, but you do have that option for that scheduled break after section 2. I highly recommend it. Go out, refresh, get a drink of water, and get back in. You can only take breaks between sections, meaning you must complete each section before continuing on to the next. So think of it this way, that you've got, it's almost like each section is its own mini exam of about 50, of exactly 50 questions. And again, the pretest or unscored items are randomly distributed throughout, so there's no way to determine what's an actual scored item or what's an unscored item. You take every question like your life depends on it. So the exam structure, as we talked about, 5 sections, 50 questions each. On test day, you can strike through or mark items as you wish. I do highly recommend that you mark them very judiciously, so sparingly mark items, just because I'll talk about this more on Thursday, but when you mark an item, you trigger in your mind that you have to come back to it. And so if you start marking lots and lots of items, it takes a lot of time to go back and review all those marked items. And so it can be what I think could be aptly called the law of diminishing returns, that the more you do it, the less result you get out of it. And so again, mark very judiciously. They do give you a scratch pad. We'll talk about this when we get closer to test day. But as a part of the VIP class, we actually do a brain dump session where we talk about what you could put on your brain dump, the little acronyms, mnemonics, memory devices to toss on your scratch pad, just to make sure you don't forget that for test day. So that's the structure of the exam. Now, as far as exam scoring goes, you have to score a 600 out of 800 scale score. Now, here at the end, I've got some score reports I'll show you that some of you, I think all of you are here, who submitted the score reports are here as well, to get the analysis of that score report, but I'll show you what it looks like. But a 600 out of 800 scale score, those of you, again, doing some quick math, you'll say, well, Will, does that mean 75%? 600 out of 800, is that 75%? No. So the scale score, what it zooms way in on the 600 mark, which is right around 137 or so. I'll show you on the exam forms that I actually have queued up for the score reports. You'll see that the passing score is around 134, 135. But the point is that the scale score takes these different exam scores and equilibrates them, puts them so they can be compared one to the other. Meaning that if you were to take any other form of the exam that day, you would get the same scale score. Now, it is the same for every state board, meaning that if you test in New York or New Jersey or California, doesn't matter. They set the same 600 out of 800 scale score. There is no no penalty for guessing. Sometimes I get students who take our class and they get a score withheld. Score withheld just means very often you have a large score increase. And so that can come with heavy duty studying. You can actually get your score from a previous attempt to the next attempt. If you increase it significantly, they could withhold it for a moment and they send you a little survey. All they do is they send you a little email survey to say, hey, how did you prepare for this exam? And if you say, I used pirated questions off of the interwebs from illicit vendors, then they'll say, okay, well, there's a problem here. But no one ever does that. Everyone just says, hey, I took PT final exam, or I used my books, and this was my study process. And they say, okay, yeah, fine. And then they give you your score. So usually it's a no big deal. There is, unfortunately, well, it gives students a little bit of a heart attack when they get that email. It's like, what? My score is withheld. What does that mean? Am I in trouble? Very often it means you either had a score increase or you answered the questions in a weird way. Like if you were super stressed out and you answered all the hard ones right and all the easy ones wrong, it's another reason you could get a score withheld. But the exam scoring is done electronically, automatically. So it's all, obviously it's all computer based. It's all multiple choice. There's no wiggle room. You either got it right or you got it wrong. And so I have never seen a manual review that actually changed a score. And part of that's because it costs $100 to do it. So not very many people do it, but mostly it's because, it's a straight up digital exam. And so either you clicked the right one or you didn't click the right one. The only trouble would be like if they miskeyed it or they entered it into the system incorrectly. That's where the trouble could be. But again, I've never seen them change that. All right, a couple of myths. We've already talked about most of these things, but a couple of myths you see that the test is harder in July and easier in January. Now, the reason this myth exists is because more people test in July and therefore more people fail in July. Fewer people test in January, therefore fewer people fail in January. And so they put in their mind, they say, oh, well, it must mean that it's easier in January, fewer people fail. Well, it's just the same proportion. The same proportionality exists just at a different rate or a different gross number, so to speak. 800 out of 800, this means that the myth is it doesn't mean you answered every question correct. Rather, it just means you got about 92%. And at 92%, they just stop caring. They say, yeah, fine. Give you a perfect score. You're on your way. Multiple correct answers. This is one that I felt like on test day. So you sit there and you're taking each question and you look at it, and you're staring at it, and you're like, I feel like that's right, but I also feel like that's right. And then I admit having a little bit of anger, some anger issues on test day, like, oh, that's arbitrary. How could they make that distinction? And the truth of the matter is, though, that the person writing the question, they have the textbook open. I mean, I've got piles and piles of textbooks. I do this all the time. So you take a textbook, you open it up, you find the content that you're targeting, and you write a question about it. And they have to cite the textbook. I mean, there's nothing ambivalent about it. It has to be precisely written so that there is only one correct answer. And so I guess, therefore, my suggestion is to make sure that you are saving your emotional energy on test day and not getting really mad at the test, because number one, it doesn't do any good. Number two, it'll help focus you to find the right answer, find the distinction. Very often it's an order of operations. When I do this one first and then that one, or any number of examples. And I'll talk about more of that on Thursday about the multiple choice questions. Another one that's kind of a fun debate: is the test academic or is the test clinical? Well, the truth is it's a little bit of both, kind of like a Venn diagram, that if you have your academic and if you have your clinical, you have this intersection between the two where you take a clinical case, like a patient case, and you apply your academic content. I mean, it's straight out of the textbook. So yes, it is academic in that fashion. However, it's always couched in the context of a clinical example. So I have heard it said, and I don't know if I would do this, but I have heard it said that some people sit down with the test and they tell themselves, all right, I've got 250 patients I need to see today, and I'm going to go through each one. Frankly, that feels a little stressful to me to say I've got 250 patients coming through the door that day, but that's one way to look at it. All right, just talking a little bit more about the VIP course. Again, I know a lot of you who are here are members of the VIP class. Those of you who are not yet, encourage you to participate with us. But the goal of the VIP course is to help organize your studies, take you through the content systematically, help you be extremely familiarized with content and also the style of questions. In fact, you'll find that we spend almost all of our live time is spent dissecting practice questions and talking about the content behind it. Practice question, talk about it. Practice question, talk about it. And you'll find that that is what yields the best results. In fact, I've got it coming up here about evidence-based study strategies, and certainly highest on that list is practice questions. You cannot get away from practice questions. And so we won't spend a ton of time on this. There's those of you, again, who are part of the VIP class, you'll find the syllabus that's up at the top of the course material. You'll be able to find that easily. Our system, if you call it that, so we'll call it our NPTE pass system, includes sessions like this, our live study sessions, where we come together, we go through practice questions. We've got a bunch of pre-recorded material. In addition to that, I highly recommend what's called active learning, and I provide to you a written workbook. So this written workbook It's provided to you in PDF form. If you need a printed copy, I can also help you track down a printed copy. I've got a bunch of those here in the office that I can I just mail out. Most people just, that's a study guide. Most people choose to just print it out themselves or do it electronically. But the workbook looks something like this. It's just, about 300 pages of blank tables, charts, ways to be active in your learning style. I love the spiral binding. I insisted on spiral binding just because when it comes to studying, it makes a big difference if you can set the thing flat and write on it. And so that's why I like the workbook. Again, it's critical to be active in your learning style. We have 6 practice exams available right now as a part of the VIP class. You get complimentary access to the crash course. Plus we do a brain dump class. We talk about the holistic approach to exam day. Make sure you know what to do on exam day, when to show up, what the whole process looks like, just trying to be very holistic. And that's what the PASS system is. It gets you through all the content, puts you on the right track so that you can be in the right mindset for test day. So our lectures, we meet twice a week for practice questions, plus there's tons of pre-recorded content. And then the assignments are part of the workbook. Essentially, you go through the musculoskeletal chapter on musculoskeletal week, go through the neuro chapter on neuro week, cardio chapter and cardio week. So really nothing too fancy there. Each of our lectures, when we get together, it'll be about 90 minutes or so. Usually we target at 90 minutes. Sometimes I go a little bit long. Like today, that may be the case. We go a spec long, but the goal is that we address content related to questions, content that may have come up during the assignments. Say, hey, I've got a question about this. And then I do record each session. So I get this question all the time. Will, what happens if I'm not able to attend the live session? Well, I record each of them and post them for your review afterward. A lot of people like to re-listen to them again and again. And the nice part about the video players, you can listen to them at up to 2x speed. So you can really just blast through it very, very quickly. So to be a part of the class, I do require that you have access to some exams. I provide to you 6. So you need to use at least 3 of those. PT textbooks, make sure your computer works, intense focus. And then I get this question all the time. Will, how many hours do I need to study each day to be successful? And I highly recommend 2 to 4 hours as a starting point. 2 to 4 hours is your average. That's what it usually takes to be consistent in getting the content to stick. I'll talk a little bit more about it here coming up, but as far as study strategies go, you just have to spend time revisiting the content in an active way. That's the key. I'm going to skip this. We already talked about the workbook. We'll just go through each chapter each week. Ideally, you take a practice exam every 1 to 2 weeks. And again, that's part of the active learning style. So again, kind of skipping through this, you don't need to submit your assignments. It would just be any specific questions you had. As a part of our course, you get access to our exclusive Telegram group. So it's a live chat group where we can chat with each other. It's a great place. If you have a question, you can post it, get some help from some of the other students. I like to chime in there quite a bit as well. So that, again, another advantage of being a part of this small VIP group. It tends to lend itself to be extremely helpful for students preparing. All right, we're going to talk about the content outline, talked about practice exams. Oh, the PETEs. A lot of you have taken PETE exams. Just remember, there are actually 4 PETE exams that are available for individual purchase. So if you go buy 2 PETEs, they come in pairs. If you purchase 1 pair of PETEs and you go to purchase another pair of PETEs, it kicks you to the other pair. And then if you go purchase it a third time, it'll kick you back to the first pair. So there's 2 pairs of PETEs available for individual purchase. These are different than the academic PETEs. If you got them through your school, you'll find that they are different. Other resources, we talked about all this stuff. Textbooks, DPT notes, school notes, review guides. Oh, I do provide a study guide as well. I provide a PDF version of our study guide. I think you'll enjoy that because you can just browse through the content extremely quickly. One of the other things you can get as a part of the class are what I like to call power calls. Power calls, this is where you can schedule a call with me. We schedule these on an as needed basis. And I recommend that you schedule 1 or 2 of them to start. And so I have had students who go in, they're like, oh, Will, looks like you have power call time available. Let me just go ahead and block 4 hours at a time. And that's not meant to be the case. The idea with the power calls is to give you an opportunity to talk with me on a somewhat regular basis to get the content, get your strategy in line, make sure you're heading down the right path. And so that power call is, again, the exclusive benefit of the VIP class that you don't get that, and especially in some of the huge classes out there. You just kind of, you toss in there and good luck. Good luck getting your question answered. So as far as getting your questions answered as a part of the class, I do encourage that, as much as you can, do your due diligence. Ask a specific question. You can submit the question either during the live classes, email, Telegram. All these are ways to get your questions answered. I won't talk too much about this. We do have the practice exam simulator, gives you full access to take the exams. You can do quizzes, quiz builder. You can analyze your performance. A lot of functionality as a part of the exam simulator that you get as a part of the VIP group. The study guide, again, is in PDF format. You use Control F to find really any search term you'd like, and you can go through that very, very quickly. So now let's talk about some of the evidence-based strategies to structure your time. So ideally, 2 to 4 hours is your minimum to start with. Certainly more could be required. Like I had some of you probably heard me talk about this before too, but I had a student a couple summers ago, 75 years old, preparing to take the exam. She'd been out of practice for 30 plus years, at a whole different career path, and was coming back into it, had to retake the test. And she was a solid 6 to 8 hour a day studier. And it took her quite a bit of time because, very literally, she was redoing PT school, which clearly takes a lot of time. So this will be different based on your differing needs. However, 2 to 4 hours most days is a good start time. So evidence-based strategies. Nothing is more important than taking practice questions. And again, that's why during our live classes, we focus heavily on practice questions so that you can analyze them, see the content behind them, be able to, what I like to call it, have X-ray vision around the question, be able to see through it, to be able to understand what it's asking and how it's tricking you or trying to trick you, or at least lead you down the wrong path, but you'll be able to see right through it. So nothing is more important than taking practice exams. The PEAT exams are a fabulous resource as well. So if you've got additional resources to purchase the PEATs, highly recommend doing that. Other evidence-based strategies for studying include frequent low-stakes quizzing. So this is where flashcards come in. So flashcards, what I mean by this is that a good flashcard gives you just a tidbit of information to prompt your memory to quiz you on whatever that thing is. So like if you're testing yourself on the cranial nerves, do you know what each of the cranial nerves does? And make a little flashcard about that. Another way to do that is through practice questions. You can take 10 questions at a time as a low stakes quiz. Variable subject material during your study session. This gets to be more important towards the end of your studies, like closer to test day. At the beginning time, obviously you have to spend adequate time learning the content the first time. But then once you've learned it, you need to vary it up so that you can make it stick. And so that's what's called distributed studying. Another way to, pulse distributed studying, that's what I have here. This is where, again, some of you have heard me talk about this before, but let's say on day 1, you study material 1. Well, on day 2, spend about 15 minutes going over material 1 again, but also learn material 2. And then the next day, go over material 2. And then maybe on the weekend, you'll go over 1, 2, and 3. You'll go over all the content that you learned on Saturday as a slightly larger review session. The point is, the mistake I see students make is that they'll spend all their time studying a bit of material. They'll get to be good at it. They'll really understand it, but then they won't look at it again for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And before you know it, it has disappeared from your mind. That's where that pulsed distributed practice, and by the way, that's a motor control principle as well. Distributed practice where the rest time is greater than the study time, or rest time is greater than the work time. What this does is it forces you to revisit the content and keeps it fresh. I've heard it said that you need to see something somewhere between 3 and 7 times to get it to actually stick. Sometimes even more than that, but especially for complex material. But you have to visit it time and time again in order to get it to stick. So I can't tell you the number of times I've had an email that said something like this, like, "Hey, Will, I failed the test. I read O'Sullivan from cover to cover, I've got O'Sullivan here. I can do it without knocking the whole library down. I read O'Sullivan cover to cover and I still failed the test. What's wrong? It's like, well, you may have seen the content as you read through it, but did you learn the content? Did you become masterful at it? And generally the answer is no. You have to revisit it time and time again. That's that active learning. So that's the evidence-based, those are the evidence-based study strategies to really lock it in on test day. What doesn't work? Obviously just rereading, osmosis. Or I had someone once who was like, hey, Will, I'm doing the workbook, but I feel like I'm just rewriting the textbook. What's wrong? It's like, well, just read. The act of rewriting it is not sufficient. You have to actually put it into your own words. Or another one, I had someone who, they sent me their assignment. They were very proud to say, hey, Will, I finished my assignment. And they had, in the PDF form, they had just copied and pasted Wikipedia articles into the whole workbook. I was like, well, I provide the workbook key. It's not like you don't have the answers. Rather, the goal is to put it in your own words, to summarize it, bullet point it, do something that forces you to analyze the content more than just seeing it. And that's where you'll see the greatest success. All right, so we talked about all these: distributed practice, randomized practice, especially towards the end of your studies, towards test day, practice testing, critical, high density, high yield studying. This means that when you study for 2 to 4 hours, eliminate the distractions. There was a study they did recently where, what was it? It was one of those sneaky studies where they were studying, they said they were studying one thing, but they're actually observing other things. And the thing they told the students, say, hey, we're trying to determine how long does it take to memorize this list. But what they were really doing was observing what their attention span was. And they found that something like some crazy number, like 99% of the participants, these are college age students, 99% of the participants had significant distraction every 6 minutes, meaning that their mind was pulled away from the material and they had to redirect, refocus every 6 minutes. Now, the trouble with that is that you can't get a lot done if you're being constantly, a constant barrage of external stimulus. So generally speaking, our attention span is about 30 to 60 minutes. And so the goal is that every 30 to 60 minutes, rather than let it just fade off to zero, you try to do something to reset your focus. And so resetting your focus, what that looks like is just making sure that you get a drink of water, adequately hydrated, something to get you moving and your mind active again. Change content material, change content type, do something that keeps you engaged with the content so that you can have a very effective 2 to 4 hours rather than an ineffective 12 hours. You'll find that you'll get more done if you're effective. And it's just a concentrated effort trying to stay effective. Study with the goal, what are you going to master today? And then take good care of yourself. Don't become a test zombie or you just lock yourself in the library. We tend to avoid things we hate doing. And so if you hate studying, you'll find every reason to avoid it. So therefore, take good care of yourself, get some exercise, spend quality time with friends, and just balance your life so that you remember why you're doing this, remember why this is enjoyable, to go through all the content. And then as far as the actual boots on the ground, making your plan, you have to just plug chunks of material into your available time. There are 3 years worth of content. There's a lot of content to go through. It's impossible to get through every single thing again in just a few weeks. However, you can get the most or the highest priority items, certainly your weakest areas and the big 3 systems. You can spend most of your time on that, and you'll find that that'll actually be solid for test day because you had a focused and very energized study plan. And just studying with the goal to make sure that you are really learning the content each time you sit down. So how should you allocate your time? Again, chunks of material into each day. How long will this take? Again, 2 to 4 hours most days is a good target. Sometimes it takes more, sometimes less. Which exam should I take first? The only recommendation I have here is that if you have access to the PETEs, to make sure that you take one early and take one late. Just take one early to get the score to see where you are now, and then take one late, so like 2 weeks before test day, as a way to gauge your progress. So again, fabulous way to gauge progress. If you have a question as a part of the class, be sure to log in and join that private Telegram group for the VIPs. You can also email me the questions. Again, just to ask you to, like, sometimes I get goofy questions like, Will, what is EKG? Like, well, what do you think? Like, and we try to get those to be, specific questions as best we can. All right. So what questions do you have as a part of what we've talked about today? My job is to over deliver here. You can always reach out to me, will@ptfinalexam.com. Again, I encourage you, those of you who have not yet signed up, to hurry and get in and be a part of our VIP class, just because on Thursday, we'll talk through multiple choice questions. And then on next week, we'll really hammer the musculoskeletal system, the biggest section on the exam. So while you're coming up with your questions, I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to, I've got some score reports I'd like to analyze with you, if that's okay. So a few score reports to analyze. I omitted the names from these, so I'm pretty sure we've got everyone who sent me their score report here that's present, but I did want to make sure to maintain as much privacy as we could. So therefore, I omitted the names from each of these score reports. So this first one, sorry, got a frog in my throat. Pull up my calculator. So this one, I'm pretty sure this question, so the bar graphs, the box and whisker plots are fabulous. They give a good visual representation of what's going on, but I actually like to spend more time in the actual raw data. So if you look at this first score report, we see that out of 200 items, this person scored 128 correct, which is not bad. I mean, let's be honest, that's a good score. 582 puts them certainly within striking distance of the test. If we were to add up and find out what the number of items was required, in order to pass the test, you'd find that this, I don't know why they don't do the tabulation for you. I'm not sure precisely why, but if you add up all these, you need 135 correct, just 34, 42, 40, 19. You need 135 correct. You see this individual scored 128. So that tells you they require about 7 questions in order to pass the exam. So 7 questions. All right, where are we going to find those 7 questions? Well, now we start going through the systems. We see that examination, not bad. I mean, 2 questions off. Differential diagnosis, they were above. Maybe the biggest one we see is that interventions could use the biggest boost. So about 4 questions off. And certainly of the 7, that would probably be the biggest bet there. Looking now by the systems, by body systems, we see cardiopulm. Again, I like to see the raw score. So the raw score, you needed 18. You got 15, so you're 3 off in cardiopulm. Musculo is not bad. The neuromuscular, you're off by about 5. So, interventions in cardio and neuro would be of high priority. Integ, other systems all look good. And then by study or by section, you see that the score is broken down by section. Again, the box and whiskers are nice, but I like to see the raw scores. So 20 out of 27, the score ranged from 24 to 22 to 29. So really it's this third section. So it makes me wonder, okay, did your focus start to fade on the third section? Was there an issue? Did you feel test boredom? Was there something that you could change about the third section of the test? And so that would be my biggest suggestion here, is to, number one, make sure you spend a lot of time in cardio and neuro interventions. And then also to really revamp the first and the third, but revamp that third section to spend a lot of time, not a lot of time, but just make sure you're at your 100% focus. All right. So a question comes over in the chat box. Sean says, should we be spending about an hour of the 2 to 4 hours a day on practice questions? It can be variable, and it also depends on the number of questions you have available to you. But a good rule of thumb would be most days to at least encounter a few questions, if not a small quiz of 10 or 20 questions. Again, you'll find that you'll be limited by the number of questions available to you, which again is the great part about the VIP class. I've got 1,200 questions in there for you, so you can break those out into small sections. They should be able to keep you going for the full 2.5 months that we're together. Over in the Q&A box, someone asks, it's my 3rd attempt and hopefully the last. I bought 2 Peats already. Should I buy these the 3rd time? So if you've already bought, so you bought 2 pairs of PEATs, so the 4 PEATs. If you've already purchased all 4 PEATs, then it may be helpful to purchase again. Maybe not. I wouldn't. Again, depends on money doesn't grow on trees, I suppose. But if you've forgotten all that you learned from the PEATs, then it might be a wise idea to grab those again. CJ says, I'm struggling sitting down and reading from my textbooks, from my study books. I feel like I do better when a topic's explained to me in video or podcast. I'm interested in the April Premium course. Do you think that course is the right fit for my struggle? Yes, you won't find as much live time in that. So we do run a premium course each quarter, which is essentially 6 weeks, once a week for 6 weeks. We just get together, almost like think of it like a brief coaching session to get together and say, okay, here's your assignment. Good luck this week. I'll see you next week. So it just depends on how much live time you'd like or need. But yeah, just you're not alone in trying to stay engaged with just the books. It can be a very difficult and challenging task. We'll just put it that way. Excellent. So let's see. Next one here. Looking at this score report, this person scored a 584. So again, you'll see a lot of similarities here. I'm pretty sure this exam version was 3346 plus 38 plus 17. I'm pretty sure this was 134 questions to be correct, or this required 134 questions in order to pass this test. So 128, you can see they're about 6 questions off. I guess this should be good news, right? You only need about 134 questions. You don't need a full 150 in order to pass the test. So, I mean, this is equal to, what is it, 67% on the test, so 67%. So again, all great news, right? You don't need 75, you don't need 70, you need 67%. I do get this question all the time. What target percentage should I have on my practice tests? So the higher or the more above 70% you get, the better. So looking through these, again, looking at these raw scores, we see pretty darn good on examination, and you can see that bear out in the bar graph or the box and whisker plot. 41 or 46, differential diagnosis is not great. Interventions also a little bit poor. And so really you can see that that's like almost the entirety of the disparity is differential diagnosis and interventions. Then looking at body systems, again, raw score, cardiopulm, pretty good. Musculo could be better. Neuro could be better. Integ could be a little better. Other systems pretty good. So really spending time on musculo, neuro, and integ and lymphatic. This is on differential diagnosis and interventions would be ideal in those systems. Then looking down at the section scores, looking at the raw range from 20 to 28, or sorry, to 30. So it's a pretty wide range, especially that crash and burn on section 1. Makes me wonder again if there were the test jitters, if there was some anxiety, what was going on during section 1. And we'll talk about that as we get closer to test day as a part of the course, but it really does boil back down to, are you focused and is your mind present for the question at hand? And it's a struggle, and you have to reanalyze yourself all the time to make sure that you are in the right mindset. But yeah, you have to make sure that really the whole disparity is section 1. If you could have performed on section 1 like you did on section 3, then really everything would be pretty good. So clearly needs a little bit of work in a number of systems, but I think the biggest one is just making sure you're super focused as each section comes around. Question comes around, how do I increase musculoskeletal and neuro scoring? So you have to spend time in the content, and that's what we do as a part of the course. We spend a lot of time in those content areas, talking about what's easily tested and how to see through it on test day. For instance, like spinal cord injury, stroke, traumatic brain injury, just making sure you have extreme familiarity with the diagnoses, and then that'll translate well on test day as well. Another question comes across, do you have any less expensive courses or any discounts? So yeah, I offer a crash course every quarter. So that's $200. It's a crash course and it just hits the big three systems, cardio, neuro. I do military discounts, or if you had a previous purchase, I do a discount as well. So you can just email me, will@ptfinalexam.com, and we can talk about if any of those would fit you as well. So this score report, another score report. This one, I believe, is another, what is it? 134. Yeah, this is the same form, 134. We're correct. We're required in order to pass this test. 126 were scored. So we can see a little bit farther off, going through each of the systems, just the raw data here. We see that differential diagnosis and interventions were not so good. So they require a little bit of intervention there, interventions. Looking at the other systems here, cardio, pretty good. Musculo, quite a bit off, 31 out of the 39 required. So 8 questions off. Neuro is pretty good. That's a good sign. Neuro is good because that one's always a little bit of a struggle. Integulymphatic, only off by a handful of questions. So really, musculoskeletal will be your best bet when it comes to hitting this again. Musculoskeletal, especially differential diagnosis and interventions. And then looking down at you'll see very similarly here, the range between 20 and 29. Again, section 1, quite a bit of worry there about anxiety or something that stymied your performance. And again, just back to what I said about having a solid mindset, making sure you're 100% focused and present with each item, especially on the first section, you'll find that leads to your best performance. This one, it came across on mobile device, so it wasn't as clear as some of the others. We see 554. I don't see the exact items required on this one. I think it'll be very similar, 135 or so. So we're off by 16 questions. Going through each of the sections, again, we can't see all we see on this really is the box and whisker plot. We see the examination interventions were especially low. And then through the body systems, the neuro and musculo, I mean, this is of paramount importance. We see that they are down quite a bit. And again, it kind of got cut off on the mobile device. And then by section score, really fairly consistent. We see that scored between 20 and 28 as the best one. So about an 8-point range. Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of exam fatigue, but really nothing too terribly significant here. I've just spent a ton of time on the musculo and neuro sections. You'll find that'll yield the best results. Good. All right, let's see. And then the last one here, I've got this one, they scored a 589. There's a question, are these the marks of students who took PT final exam? A couple of them are, a couple of them are not. Like I solicited over in our Facebook group, anyone who wanted to have their score analyzed. And so some of these are folks who are not yet part of our VIP class. 589, we see they scored 130. Again, if you added this up, I think it would come out to 135 or 134. 130. So again, 5 questions off or so. The box and whisker plot, a little bit hard to see, but we see that the intervention section was probably the lowest one here. Well, yeah, certainly the lowest one. And then by body systems, 16 of 18, 42, 29. Like really not far off on any of these. Maybe other systems slightly, not very far off at all. And then by sections, we see that the score ranged from 29 to a low of 24. So again, a pretty tight range here, extremely close. So these are the ones that are frustrating. You're like, so close. But as far as what I would spend my time on, there's certainly room for improvement in the big 3 systems. You can see that all of these, you've got just a wealth of questions you could increase on, certainly the other systems as well. But really, you only need about 5 more questions. So could you improve? This is a question I always like to ask students. Could you improve your score by 5 questions over the course of 3 months? You say, well, absolutely, I could. I mean, that's clearly possible. All right. So could you improve it by 10 questions in 3 months? Well, yes, absolutely. How about by 20 questions in 3 months? I think so too. And I guess just looking at that mindset of trying to just blast past the top, that's going to be your best bet there. All right, looking at some of the questions that came across, Hada says the marks are very close. They do not round at all. How many attempts do you have for the exam? You get 6 attempts. And now there is a little asterisk there that you can apply for more attempts, but it's a bit of a process, but you get 6 lifetime attempts on the exam. Let's see. Is there any way to buy your study guide only? And do you offer scholarships? So yes, I do the study guide as a separate purchase. If you'd like, you can just email me for that link, will@ptfinalexam.com. I can send you that link. Do we do scholarships? Yes, right now we don't have any open scholarships at the moment. However, we do occasionally do scholarships. Yeah, kind of a complex question. The short answer is yes. The long answer is not at this moment. We don't have any open scholarships available for application, but on occasion we do get scholarships. We offer military discounts and again, discounts for those of you who previously purchased. So there's a question that comes across that did a previous course before. Is there any discount that I can get on the VIP class? And yeah, just send me a quick email and we can look it up and help find what you need. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and see what other questions you have. What questions do you have for me? So we've been going here for about an hour. You've had some fabulous questions, by the way. Appreciate your great participation as we've gone through that. What questions do you have? Again, those of you who are wondering about where to find the recording, so those of you part of the VIP class, you'll find this recording in the course dashboard. I'll have it marked up near the top. You'll be able to see that. Those of you who are not part of the VIP class, I will post this on some of our social media, like our YouTube channel. You'll be able to find it there as well. Good. What questions do you have? And you'll see in the slide deck that I do have a couple of questions queued up, but I think we'll save those for next time. On Thursday, we'll go through really nothing but practice questions and how to analyze questions, multiple choice question strategies, all the things you need to know for test day. Any questions or concerns as we come to an end? See, starting this course this coming week, will it sum up for the April exam or July? So we go through the course each quarter. So starting this week, we are starting up the VIP class and we will target the April exam. And then in May, so the exam will be at the end of April. In the first part of May, we'll start up for the July exam. So those of you who are targeting the July exam, and I know we've got some of you who are already a part of the VIP class, but that VIP class gives you 9 months of access. So in a sense, you'd be able to repeat the class twice over between now and July. Good. What other questions do you have? See, over in the Q&A box, if my first attempt score is more than 60 points off of passing, would you recommend studying for the July exam? Just worried about wasting attempts. Good question. The short answer is we need more data. So generally speaking, I have students target the next available exam. The reason I do that is because it helps to focus your studies, gives you a very direct and proximal target so that you can work steadily towards that. That being said, there have been certainly there have been times when we've needed to push to the next exam. So for instance, we're targeting now April. What I would suggest is study like crazy, like you're targeting the April exam. Then about 2 or 3 weeks before test day, take a practice exam to see where you realistically are. At that point, you make a decision. Say, okay, am I good to continue with the April test, or am I still quite a ways off? And should I then target the July test? The reason I have you do that is because there's I think for about $50, you can reschedule your test date. Again, I know money doesn't grow on trees, but the benefit of targeting this proximal test date is so great because it helps you stay focused and really targeted rather than I see it wait. And not that you would do this, but I would do this. My mind would go on a mental vacation for 2 or 3 months because they're like, oh, I don't have to study now. And then July test would come around and I would be in the exact same place I am now, just 3 months down the line. So point is that I would suggest targeting the next exam, but then reevaluating about 2 or 3 weeks before test day to see if it's realistic or not, and then making the decision then. So not that well, I guess we are. We're punting the decision down the road a spec, that decision of to postpone or not, but only because we need more data. You'll be studying between now and then, and you'll have more data to make that decision. Good. Very good question, by the way. Excellent. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and bring today to a conclusion. Again, appreciate all your great participation, your great questions. We'll meet up again on Thursday for our multiple choice question strategies. Be sure to join us for that. That'll be a ton of fun. We'll go through, I'll ask you the questions. You'll put in your responses. We'll talk about the questions, and we'll talk about the ways they trick you or won't trick you on test day. So we'll be able to watch for that. Okay. With that, we'll bring today to an end, to a conclusion. Will Crane fist pumps all around. I'll catch you all on Thursday. In the meantime, stay safe out there. Happy studying, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.